You! Yes, you! Put down those Final Fantasy cards right this moment! Edge of Eternity previews are here! That's right, it's time to move on with your life! Now, I do open preview videos this kind of joke quite often, and I've also done a video recently about how Cube can help save you from this kind of perpetual hype thing. Basically, Magic moves too fast. If you're new to Magic, if Final Fantasy got you into it, if Bloomberg got you into it, and you're thinking, boy, gee, this does move at a rapid pace, it's true. You just got to kind of pick your battles at this point. It's just an unrelenting thing that's never giving up. I've been joking about it, and perpetual hype for like 5+ years on this channel at this point. With all of that said, some of this stuff is very, very cool and very, very exciting, and I'm actually very excited for Edges of Eternity just generally. So let's jump into it and look at the previews from today's preview stream. Now, some of the images I've got here are a bit low res because they're captured from screen. And also I'm using them ahead of time because someone accidentally put up all the previews earlier today. I'm going to wait for the Wizards stream to happen. You're not going to see this video before the Wizards stream has showed these cards off, but that's why some of them are of a quite low resolution. If you want to pre-order anything Edge of Eternity in North America, you can do so from CoolStuffInc.com and use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it helps support the show, baby. And in Europe, in the old world where I live, you can go to magicmadhouse.co.uk. They've got a huge range of products, including things like Warhammer, Pokemon, Digimon, One Piece, all the other card games. But if you want Magic, this is your one-stop shop too. Single product and sealed product using the on-screen code, which is PK Edging, to get 5% off all your orders, excluding sale and pre-order items. That's PK Edging in honor of Edge of Eternity. It means nothing else, don't worry about it. Let's start with Cosmog. Oh boy. Now, I haven't read the story episodes yet, so I'm not fully up on the lore of the set, so I'm probably going to say some things that will upset some of the Vorfossers among you. But basically, there is some sort of barrier or wall between this space, the Edges of Eternity, which is its own plane, and the rest of the multiverse. It's meant to be difficult to get to and traverse to, but there is a wall in which things leak through from other planes and from the rest of the multiverse. And thus we have some familiar faces, some familiar motifs, some familiar ideas. In this case, we have a Lurgoyf, but it's an elemental Lurgoyf. It's an elemental in the sense that it's the element of the cosmos, I guess. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, this is referencing Tarmogoyf, the most famous Lurgoyf, a very good competitive stable for a very long time that has now been power crept and eclipsed. If it was in standard now, it'd just be good. It wouldn't be particularly good, just flat good. But now it is in standard, but with more hoops to jump through. So where traditional Tarmogoyf is green and it cares about the graveyard and each graveyard, Cosmogoyf cares specifically about the exile zone. It's green, it's black, it is a star and a star +1 in its toughness spot, and on its text box it says this creature's power is equal to the number of cards you own in exile, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. Now normally with the Lurgoyfs, the Tarmogoyfs, the Pyragors and all that sort of stuff, they all care about number of card types in those zones. Cosmogoyf only cares about actual numbers of cards, and thus I think this card is actually really quite good. Whether or not it's going to be good enough in standard, where it might be more difficult to get things into exile, although things being in exile is like a motif of this set, and I do think that's going to be a common thing we're going to see in standard going forward, is cards that care about that stuff, like, not Karametra, the other one, Ketramos. I do think in other formats where you delve things away, or you spellbomb your own graveyard, or whatever, this card can be very big. It has got a prohibitive green-black casting cost, which means that you can't just play it off of, 2 forest, for example, which is both a balancing element, but also because if it's a green card just cared about exile, it'd be very strange. I think this is actually really quite strong and has quite a high ceiling for what kind of impact it can have if you can get a lot of stuff into your exile zone relatively easily. Next up, we can look at the new mechanic Void, which cares about things leaving the battlefield, non-land permanents leaving the battlefield. So it's basically a fixed revolt, where revolt on cards like, I'll put one of them on screen now. I'll put Raider, I think is one of them. The green 3-drop as well, green-white 3-drop that I really like. Either way, the revolt was kind of too easy to get off, if you will, because of fetch lands. If you just cracked a fetch land, you already had revolt online. This is still pretty easy when you have like Mishra's Baubles and similar. It's not exactly difficult, but it's a fixed version of that. In this case, on the right-hand side you have Tragic Trajectory, which is a reference to Tragic Slip. I absolutely adore this art. Someone getting pulled into like a black hole situation, and the helmet's been split off, and they have that like floating airiness to them. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, or target creature gets -10/-10 until end of turn, instead if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn. And thus it's Tragic Slip, which used to have a morbid trigger, with a slightly bigger front end and a smaller ceiling, I guess. Very cool reference to classic Magic stuff and Magic tropes, whilst also using the new mechanic. Love this stuff. Energy Acolyte, on the other hand, I say on the other hand, I'm not going to say it's necessarily bad because I haven't read it yet. It's a 4-mana 4/4 human cleric with lifelink. When one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So it's 1 or more creatures. So for each opponent you hit, you will draw a card. So in Commander, you can get like 3 cards out of this, but in 1v1, you're only getting 1 card. And at the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So it's a 4/4 token generator with card advantage slapped on. It's reasonable. I can see this being pretty well. It's at the beginning of your end steps. It's not that great in Commander either because you can get a huge amount of value out of that second trigger. It's just fine. I don't think this is that exciting. I like the design space. It's a cool card. I don't think it's going to blow up any formats though, and that's fine. I like it when cards don't blow up formats. The Eternity Elevator is a 5-mana legendary artifact. It's a spacecraft and has station, which means you can get it to do more than it already does. I'll explain more in a second. It originally just taps for 3 colorless mana. But once stationed, once you have 20 charge counters on it, which you can put onto it by tapping another creature you control to put a charge count on that's equal to the power of that creature, only as a sorcery speed. But once you've tapped 20 powers worth of creatures, this taps to add X mana of 1 color, where X is the number of charge counters on the Eternity Elevator. So basically it is a Dreamstone or Hedron Archive, whatever it is, the 6 mana one, but for 1 less mana and taps for 3 colorless, which makes it better than that, but worse than the Gilded Lotus on its like raw dog normal version. But one station, this thing taps for 1 billion mana and can tap for a mana of a certain color. So this is quite the upside for a 5 mana rock to have on it, but getting to 20 charge counters will take a long ass time. I do think that it's too long. 20 charge counters is a lot in your average game of a competitive 60 card format, and even in some games with Commander. Where I do think this will be good is if you're going to relatively easily make a creature of 20 power or higher. So if you are making Merit Lage tokens, if your Commander gets really big, if you play Lord of Extinction, Consuming Aberration, any of those things that get really, really big then don't do a lot, they can just station up the Eternity Elevator and similar, and now you've got probably the most powerful mana rock ever printed once you've charged it up. The other flip side of that is if you just make a lot of tokens, so if you're on like Shatterfang, if you are on Virhan, there's loads of different commanders that make a lot of power and have a lot of power in play, often non-invasive, so it's not necessarily even attacking, or it might be vigilant in the case of Virhan. Either way, you can tap them to power up the elevator and get yourself a very powerful mana rock. I think this card is a solid card. Again, not breaking any formats, but an absolutely solid include in a Commander deck that wants to have a 5 mana rock that makes 3 mana with upside. I still might just play Mightstone, Meekstone, or whatever it's called. The one that ETBs and draws you 2 cards and gives a creature -5/-5 is like a choice. But I guess this taps for mana for even... That artifact only gives mana for artifacts, right? It's the charged up Power Stone mana. Yeah, this card's sweet. It's also the depiction of like a space elevator, right? Which just reminds me of the scene from Foundation when the space elevator is blown up. Spoilers for season 1, episode 1 of Foundation. I shouldn't do that. I haven't finished the show, so people would spoil it for me. I don't know why I'm saying that. Someone's going to spoil it in the comments now, aren't they? Exalted Sunborn is this set's Mythic Angel. Most sets, traditionally in Magic, get a Mythic Angel. I say this, actually, on a quick search, there wasn't a Mythic Angel in Aetherdrift. Actually, maybe it's not as common as I think. There definitely was one in Caverns. I guess Archangel Elspeth counts for March. Anyway, this is the one for this set. Exalted Sunborn is a 5-mana, 4/5 flying, life-linking Angel Wizard, importantly, which is a creature that does matter. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many tokens are created instead. So we've got another Anointing Procession, another Elspeth, another half a doubling seasoning effect on a card, which is sweet. I like to see this effect in white more. I think white should get that part of the color pipe more than green does. And it has Warp. This is a new mechanic. So Warp is you may cast this card from your hand for its Warp cost, exile this creature at the beginning of the next end step, then you may cast it from exile on a later turn. Basically, you can get a cheaper version of the card. So on turn 2, or any turn for that matter, you can warp this out. It won't have haste, so it's not really a combat body, and it won't be able to block either unless you're flashing it, which you could do if you had other effects that give you these creatures flash, I guess, like a Vidalcan Orrery. But basically, you're just playing out 2 mana as it's a body with the text that it has on it. It has the rules element. You're basically playing out to get that doubling effect, and then you put it back into exile. Now, beyond that, it's kind of like a pseudo evoke, except the creature doesn't go to the bin. It's not immediate sack. You aren't sacking, you're actually exiling. So it will trigger like things like I mentioned earlier, Ketchmos, to draw you a card and lose you a life. And it also just gives you the option to recast it later. So it's somewhere between evoke and adventure, I guess is where I'd place it. I like the mechanic a lot. It does have a chance to be probably too good. Interestingly, this would have triggered up the Beanstalk with all the warp cards. So then banning it out of standard makes even more sense now that we know about warp, because not only were they fixing whatever the next best deck would be when they banned out all the red stuff, but they knew that warp was coming too. Although I think Beans was rotating. No, I don't think it was, actually. So I think Wilds was rotating. And then we've got a legendary warper here. We've got the 3-mana rare 3/3 called Halia, the guided by light, sorry. This is a legendary creature, human soldier. Whenever Halia or another creature or artifact you control enters, gain 1 life. So it's a super soul sister, caring about artifacts and creatures. And at the beginning of your end step, draw a card if you gain 3 or more life this turn. So in essence, as long as you put 3 artifacts or creatures into play, including Halia herself, you are drawing a card, which is pretty good. Only your end step, though. You can't do on every rotation of the table in Commander. And then she's got the warp cost of 1. So you could warp her out and then play 2 other 1-drops, for example, on turn 3. Trigger, draw a card at the end, and then she gets warped out and goes back into exile and similar. Very cool Soul Sister design, in my opinion. I just love seeing what they've done with white. I was one of the adamant champions of white just being gash for a lot of the time, especially in Commander, especially in multiplayer. So seeing them do things like this with like Halia and similar it's wonderful. I think they've done a great job of making white more exciting and more interesting over the years. That's one of my big positives about the way Wizards have treated white in the color pie. Couple more warp creatures here. Quantum Riddler is a 5-mana 4/6 Sphinx that flies. When it enters, draw a card. As long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, if you would draw 1 or more cards, you draw that many cards plus 1 instead. So if you are empty-handed or just raw dogging with 1 singular card in hand, and you warp this into play, it will actually give you 2 cards for its first trigger, making it a warp Mole Drifter. I thought that's what this was originally when I first started reading it. This is the mythic warp Mole Drifter riff, but then I realised with the extra card draw there, it's got an effect that's similar to other Sphinxes in the past. Not quite Consecrated Sphinx, but other big Sphinxes that bring you card advantage. Aggressively costed at 5 and 2, 5 for its main cost, 2 for its warp cost. It cantrips even off the warp cost. This card's really quite good. Again, what kind of home will it have? I don't know, but I can see this seeing quite a bit of play. The rare dragon is also quite strong. 5 mana to play it for its actual original cost. It's a flying haste dragon. When it enters, it 1 damage to target creature and opponent controls, and then it warps for 3 mana. So for 3 mana, you can play it early. This one actually has haste, so you get a 4/5 flying haste creature for 3 that then comes back later for 5 mana and does ping a creature. Now, the pinging of a creature does allow you to kill like a 1/1 flying token, for example. Maybe there is some sort of lingering soul style effect on the horizon or in this set, something that will predominantly show up in Standard and give people a lot of 1/1 flying bodies, perhaps. But either way, I think the warp cost into the main cost makes this a very playable dragon in some sort of the top end of a red aggressive deck, or maybe just a medium red. Because don't forget, you can... a 3-mana flying hasting threat is still reasonable at the top end. Probably not as good as Screaming Nemesis from what I read in Standard, but... yeah, I'd be surprised if we don't see this card have a home somewhere in its lifetime during Standard. And at common, we've got a 6-mana 5/5. When it enters, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on. It's a robot jellyfish, by the way. And when it warps, or it can warp, should I say, for 3 mana. So it's a 3-mana early spell that triggers like artifacts and creatures enter the battlefield, importantly, thanks to the warp cost. Then it triggers itself to put a stun counter on a thing and tap it, and then it goes back into exile, back into space, if you will, and then later down the line you pay for 6 mana to get a 5/5 that enters and does that too. The one thing I will say is that it looks like it flies. It does not, but if it's a 6-mana 5/5 flyer with this stun effect, that'd be so good and limited at common. That'd be kind of bonkers, actually. Quite a strong limited card, as far as I can tell, but not really a constructed card. It's important to know that, like, in limited, if you have a 6-mana creature that will take over the game when it finally resolves and be a big body, this isn't quite that, but it's still a big fatty at 6. Having it have an earlier mode that you can use it for, so it's got an extra bit of utility, and it's not just rotting in your hand. You make your 6th land drop, is very, very good. We've seen this with Avengers in the past. We've seen this with Avengers is the only one I can think of really off the top of my head. Basically, getting value ahead of you slamming your fatty is very strong. Cool design, though. Loving a robot jellyfish coming out of the Eternities, and just I said the Eternities. I think Edge of Eternities isn't in the Blind Eternities, right? The Blind Eternities is between planes, out of space, out of the warp, if you will, and grabbing someone. Cool design. Red Tiger Mechan is a 4-mana robot cat. We got full on this looks like Sector or Cyrax from Mortal Kombat to me. It's a 3/3 with haste and it's got warp 2. So 2 mana for a 3/3 haster, and then later on you play for 4 mana. It's not quite the dragon, but it's pretty good. This could be, by pretty good I mean, this could be a very reasonable limited card, depending on how much you want to have that warp effect. Constructed, no, I don't think this is good enough. It's probably teetering on the edge, but at common, I mean, they could have done a rare here with extra stuff structured to make it playable. Constructed, I wouldn't be surprised if we see at least one other hasty, maybe uncommon or mythic, hasty warper in red. More limited, like flavor theme sort of setting here. So 5 mana, 3/5 whale with flying, ETB Surveil 2, and then it has warp. So it's a 2 mana Surveil 2 earlier in the game, which becomes a 5 mana flyer, 3/5 flyer later down the line. Absolutely solid, like, you know, curve filling big butt flyer for the limited deck. And Starfield Shepherd is the uncommon 5 mana 3/2 flyer in white. When this creature enters, search your library for a basic plains card or a creature card with mana value 1 or less. Reveal it and put it in your hand. And it has warp 2. This card, I think, might actually be constructed playable. Wait, hear me out. I know I'm an absolute fucking fiend for flicker and shit, but okay. There's a black and white flicker deck in Modern. I'm assuming that deck will bleed over into Pioneer over time, although most of the cards are Horizons based. Either way, this is a 2 mana ETP trigger. You go and find yourself a Giver of Runes. You go and find yourself a what's the 1 mana cat. Ocelot Pride, that's the one, sorry. Or you can get a Ragavan, or you can get Guide of Souls. You can get all these like very powerful 1-drops off of this. You can get Esper Sentinel off this. You can get Mother of Runes and Legacy off this. Anyway, so 2 mana, go get that. Or you can just get a Plains. So it allows you to basically see this as like a Plains cycler kind of thing, and thus you don't have to play so many Plains in your deck. Anyway, so that does that. Then it goes back into exile and comes down as a 5 mana 3/2 later. But as the 2 mana 1 is in play, you can flicker it with Failure, you can flicker it with Ephemerate. Flickering with Ephemerate, by the way, any of these warp creatures for that matter, something to go into, will flicker it and it'll come back unwarped. It will come back as the original fat side, so it doesn't disappear again. So in this case, you would Ephemerate this, go get another Plains, another mana value of 1 creature. You've drawn basically essentially 2 cards off of this, and you yourself a 3/2 flyer. The 5 mana end is expensive, but I do think the utility of being able to go and grab mana value 1 or less creatures is very, very good. This can go get Walking Ballista. That's not what you want to do in the black-white blink deck in Modern per se, but it's definitely something we should consider it being able to do for other decks. I really think this has got legs compared to pretty much all of the other warp creatures, even the Exalted Sunborn. Like, it makes it a token, sure, but that's not constructed play. That's a commander card, if anything, and a standard card. This card is good. I like this card a lot. And then the next, probably best warp card, 4 mana, 3/4 Human Bard. It's a Starfield Vocalist. If opponent enters the battlefield, causes a triggered ability or opponent you control to trigger, this ability triggers an additional time. It's Panharmonicon on a body, but it does say permanent, by the way, not just creature, where Panharmonicon is just creature and artifact, right? So this even counts for enchantments and similar. And it also has warp 2. Bizarrely, you can play this for 2 mana to get a 3/4 temporary Panharmonicon, then replay it for its full fat cost on 4 mana later. Yeah, this card has fucking potential, that's for sure. It could be very, very strong. I do just think it's really funny that we keep getting a Panharmonicon style effect like every set. I think it's a bit too much at this point. It's crazy how many, like, I love ETB value doubling. I love it. I love flickering and I love doubling value. This, for example, maybe an unpowered cube card potentially. But either way, it's just crazy that we keep getting so many like ETB doublers every single turn then. Every single set. Like, we've got a Anointed Possession and a Panharmonicon effect in this set with just this mechanic. It's a well we're returning to perhaps a little bit too much in my humble opinion. Back on that station grind is the Extinguisher Battleship, an 8 mana spacecraft. When it enters, destroy target non-creature permanent. Then this spacecraft does 4 damage to each creature, and then it stations, and at 5 counters, it's a flying, trampling 10/10. Meet the new Meteor Golem. Now, Meteor Golem hits non-land, this hits non-creature, which importantly means this can hit lands. Oh, I love hitting lands. Now, Meteor Golem is 1 mana less, is a 3/3 creature, so it can attack and block, and can be flickered more easily with things like Restoration Angels, for example, where this has to get stationed up to be flickered, and then once it's stationed up and you flicker it, it loses all its charge counters. So it's just not ideal for flickering unless your deck can flicker specifically non-creature permanents, like Failure, for example, or Flicker Wisp. That said, it is 8 mana, so you have to find a way to get it into play, but let's be honest, Meteor Golem sees quite a bit of commander play. This is just that, but for 1 more mana. So if you're cheating into play or similar, this just does more. It is both a destroy target thing, that isn't a creature, of course, and then a 4 damage to each creature. It's a Wrath. It is a big, or bigger than Anger of the Gods. It's a Storm of the Gods or whatever it is, isn't it? The 4 mana one. It's big. This card is quite strong. I like it a lot. Especially as it can become like a 10/10 flying trampler later. Sunsur Secundi is the Void Altar, is a land planet. Planets, I guess, will have some sort of synergy with certain things that we haven't seen yet. It taps to black and has station. So not only spacecraft will have stations, the planets can have them too. One station up to 12 charge counters. It has 2 mana, one of which has to be black. Tap, pay 2 life, sack a body, a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power, activate only as a sorcery. This is an incredibly powerful effect, but it takes a million years to get there. It's kind of similar to how I was saying about the mana rock earlier, is only good if you have like the redundancy or the ability to get it online, because your deck just naturally has a lot of power just sat around. Either one big fucking fat boy that can't get through because there's no evasion, or loads of tokens. The exact same logic happens here. It's not just the mana rock, it's all station cards. That's such a high station cost. The interesting thing is, like, once you're up to the 12 station, it isn't just like off to the races. You then need to have 2 mana. You need to be able to tap this, so it hasn't been used. It can't come in this turn and be immediately usable, and can't be used for mana on its turn that you use it. And you got to pay 2 life, and you got to sack a body, and then you can draw the cards. It's a lot of hoops to get somewhere, but once you get there, you are getting like huge amounts of value. The card is just okay for that reason. It takes a lot to get it online. The problem with the station, like lands as well, perhaps same with, well, maybe less than artifacts and creatures, is that they put a target on your back, right? Like if people are scared of this effect, like if you're tapping a 12/12 to station this and then sacking that 12/12 the next turn, yeah, drawing 12 cards is going to put a target on your back. I'm not convinced by this. There seems to be a cycle for these though. The blue one is a bit more exciting. I love me Eternities Academy. This is a blue planet called Uthros, Titanic God Core, and it looks like a face. It looks like a cute little face with a big open mouth. Like, ooh, taps are blue. Station 12 plus. It's blue, tap, add blue for each artifact you control. Again, they have put safety valves on this upon safety valves upon this. It is ETB tapped. It costs you a blue to put into it to then tap it to make blue. So it's not quite becoming a Titanic Academy. Instead, it's becoming a Titanic Academy that requires you to have an access to another blue source. And thus, again, I'm just not sold on it. I think it's a little bit better than the black one. It's got a higher ceiling, although drawing cards is pretty good. I don't know. Both of them are kind of sucky because they take so much setup to get there. Not really that excited by them. Throbbing Hive Pool, 6 mana artifact that has affinity for slivers. That's right, kids. You've seen it in the thumbnail. Slivers are back. This is perhaps a one and done thing. Like, let me read the rest of the card, then we'll talk about it. Slivers you control have double strike and haste, so it's kind of like half an Achroma's Memorial for slivers. At the beginning of your upkeep, create 2 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens. Now, I mentioned earlier about things bleeding through, so we got the Tarmogoyf or the Goyf sort of like motif. Here we have slivers seeping through, and they're the traditional one-armed, one-clawed slivers that we knew prior to the M12 Predator revamp, restyling that no one liked. Of course, this is 6 mana rock that doesn't really do anything until you get it online, and even then it just makes you 2 bodies that have double strike and haste, to be fair, on the following turn after you've cast it. So without any sliver support, it's weaker. Now, there are changelings that will affect this. Roaming Throne isn't a changeling, but it can be put on to Sliver for this in current standard. And there's 3 Tree Mascot, which is a 2 mana 2/1 that filters your mana from Foundations. It's a Bloom Burrow plant in Foundations. This has changing too. There might be one other from Foundations that I can't remember off the top of my head. But my assumption is that when Lorwyn lands in January, we will have more changelings to support the different kindred and creature type matters, like sort of archetypes in the set. And thus we'll have more Slivers in the set. We might see in standard. There may be 1 or 2 more Slivers that have like pushed through the walls between planes and become a thing here, maybe. But ultimately, I think this is a plant for doing things with changelings down the line, or slivers coming back full on in a set beyond, further beyond Lorwyn. That said, these are actually kind of good in multiples. So if you play this as a 6 mana artifact that on the following turn makes you 2 slivers, this means if you draw a second copy of Threading Hive Pool, that one now costs 4 because you control 2 colorless sliver creature tokens. If you go 2 turns before drawing your next Hive Pool, then that Hive Pool costs 4. And then if you go 3 turns, that Hive Pool costs 0. Now, that's not particularly good because you still have to pay a 6 mana Hive Pool in the first place, but I do think they aren't legendary on purpose to allow that kind of play, where you can play a full play set in your deck, and they're kind of like control finishes almost, like Bitter Blossoms on crack, but you have to play them on turn 6 for the first one, or turn 5 with a mana rock. And then they just get better in multiples, as you have multiple in play and they all cost 0 once the slivers are out. I think that's interesting, but I don't think it's very good. And then we've got an Eldrazi, another thing that's leaked between the walls and my voice broke then, the walls and the gates between dimensions. Anti-Causal Vestige is a 6 mana 7/5 Eldrazi. When this creature leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Then maybe put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Then it's got Warp 4. Yeah, this warp card is absolutely nuts. So when it enters, It's just a 6 mana 7/5, sure. But when you warp it, you get you have a lead the battlefield trigger when it exiles out. You draw a card, put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield equal to less than your lands. So if you've got 4 lands when you're warping it, you go up to 5. You're putting a 5 CMC or less into play tap. That could just be another land, by the way. It doesn't have to be anything else. It could, if your hand is just lands and spells that aren't permanent, you can still get lands out of this. If you're flickering this, if you're blinking this with Eldrazi Displacer, which is not really played very heavily anymore, but Ephemerates and similar, you are getting a trigger every time it leaves to draw a card and then put a permanent card from your hand into play and so on. This is going straight into Abdul Adrian for me in Commander. This card is bonkers with Flicker engines, and I think it'll probably be part of the Flicker packages of future Flicker archetypes in Cube 2. Very, very strong. And then we've got a showcase of the Lander mechanics. All 3 of these are common, 1 rare and 2 commons. As Biotech Specialist, a 2 mana 1/3. When it enters, create a Lander token. And whenever you sacrifice an artifact, this creature deals 2 damage to target opponent. And there's Galactic Wayfarer, a 3 mana 3/3 that does the same thing. It makes a Lander token, and that's it. Human Scout. And then Kavu Landseeker is a 4 mana 4/3. Kavu Soldier with Menace. When it enters, create a Lander token at the beginning of your end step on your next turn. Sacrifice that token. Temporary spaceships. Basically, Landers are artifacts that for 2 mana on tap, you sack them. We haven't got a picture of it yet, but you have to search your library for a basic land. It is a rampant growth in artifact token form. In the same way that clues are card draw and treasures are mana, rampant growth, well, Landers are just rampant growth. Interestingly, it's cool mechanically as a motif because it's like the shuttles with which you use to move from your big spaceships down to the ground to do some exploration. They are the Lander craft. They are temporary, they are sacrificial, they aren't important to be retrieved, and thus they can be sacrificed to discover land, to search the planet and stuff. I think this is very flavorful. I really, really like it. I do think it's interesting that, like, where clues and food and treasure and blood to a much less extent, but still valid, and junk as well, those tokens are all very evergreen and can be in other sets and just be those things within those worlds. Landers, being an artifact that finds you a land, is a spaceship in this setting. I guess we could have Landers printed into a 3rd visit to Ixalan, and they could be boats, for example. They could also be something more abstract in terms of Lander, or a artifact that finds you land. A compass, for example. A map, for example. I guess they can come back to this. I just think it's interesting that the Lander word will be stretched a bit thin when coming back to it for other sets. But I guess I do like it when they do things that aren't, like, I guess, parasitic or insular. They can be used later on to build out other sets and other worlds. I just want to say that Biotech Specialist is kind of a bit nuts. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, this deals 2 damage to target opponent. That's treasures, clues, food, blood, Landers, and so on, meaning that in Commander, this guy is a fucking machine gun-like payoff for all of your food, clue, and land and treasure tokens, basically. So this guy goes very well with Tireless, Provisioner, and similar. Next up, we have some borderless treatments for 5 cards, things we haven't seen yet, so we're going to go through each one. These are the surrealist space art style. So this is like an alternate frame. All the cards come in the normal frame, which we haven't seen yet. So Nova Hellkite we've seen, and Quantum Riddler we've seen. These are both 2 warp cards we looked at earlier in the video. Mutinous Massacre is a 3 colorless, 2 black and 2 reds, that's 7 mana, sorcery, choose odd or even, destroy each creature with mana value of the chosen quantity, then gain control of all creatures until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. 0 is even as a reminder text. This is Insurrection with a Wrath strapped to it. Its downside is that you do have to kill half the creatures in play, you don't get to choose. And thus it's not always a good insurrection, but it's a big splashy spell nonetheless. Not really constructed playable, but going to be pretty solid and game breaking perhaps in Commander. Not game breaking as in like it needs to be banned, but what I mean is it's a bit wombo combo. Insurrection doesn't seem that much play anymore, but Insurrection often is just like cast this, win the game on the spot if no one can sack their board or counter your spell. And this is probably a similar situation, albeit a little bit harder because it has to kill a load of stuff. Rust Harvester is a 1 mana 1/1 with Menace. It's a robot, it's rare, has 2 tap, excellent artifact card from your graveyard, put a counter on it, a +1 counter on it, does damage equal to its power to any target. This is some sort of weird artifact gobbling, not goblin, but gobbling. I guess it's like Grim Lavamancer, really. It costs more to activate than Grim, and it needs specifically an artifact in the bin, which isn't that hard. And it becomes just a big old kid anyway. Like, it's not just like pinging your opponent for 2 damage or shooting a creature for 2 damage. It is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It also means that you can, like, grow it with anthems and steel overseers and other shit before activating, and then when you activate it just does damage to its power. A very, very strong 1-drop, like very strong. I think this might be Vintage Cube playable. I think this might be Eternal Format playable. It just seems good in Affinity. Like, Imagine a world where you're like using Arcbound Ravager and Hardened Scales and stuff to put counters onto this bad boy, and then all you need to do is exile the Ravager that you just put in the bin to the Rust Harvester's ability to shoot an opponent in the face for however big you've made your Rust Harvester. I think this thing might be good enough to push Hardened Scales to be green-red scales. It's that good. And then Terra Symbiosis is a 3-mana enchantment. Whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, you may draw that many cards. Do this only once each turn. Kind of combos with Rust Harvester, weirdly. Very, very strong payoff for counter strategies. Importantly, it's once per turn, but not once just in your turn. You can put counters on things in other people's turns, activate your Rust Harvester in someone else's turn, for example, to draw a card. Terra Symbiosis is a solid payoff. I think it's more of a commander card than a constructed card, constructed competitive, because it doesn't do anything itself. Just all very, very strong cards. This set, at the moment, feels very powerful, significantly more powerful than Final Fantasy, shall we say. These arts are pretty sick. I like the fact that it's the surrealist element, but they're all vastly different. You've got this like real, I don't even know how to describe the Rust Harvester, like sort of thing going on. It's very psychedelic. Then Terra Symbiosis' art is quite psychedelic too, but in a completely different way. This sort of like abstract idea of a thing within this person's head. Then Quantum Riddler is at the front of a 70s sci-fi novel. I just love all this. I think the visual identity of the set, both in the normal stuff and this, is just knocking it out of the park. I think the set is gorgeous. Like, to go back one, Galactic Wayfarer, like this art, it's not particularly like fancy or anything, but it's just evocative. I don't know, there's something about it that makes me, I love it. I want to include this in my space cube. It's just an adventurer still atop the wreckage of a perhaps lander from the past. There's these like intricate windmills in the background that are like windmill giant ring things that we may never get explained, but it still gives us some depth to the world. There's these trees that are like giant ball sacks. I don't know. And the Kavu's armor too. I don't know. I just think this set is, I don't know, it's ticking all the boxes for me for the kind of shit that I'm into, I guess. I'm very biased towards sci-fi. And then lastly, on the note of sci-fi and science fiction novels, like I just mentioned a moment ago, check out these. These are the special guest slots. This is one of the 4 slots you can get in the boosters. This special guest is a load of reprints, Magus of the Moon, Nexus of Fate, Paradox Haze, Sliver Overlord, Warping Whale, none of which will be standard legal, but of course become historic legal upon being printed onto Arena. And all of these are in the style of an old pulp sci-fi novel, and they're just incredible. Like, absolutely phenomenal. Now, there are some visual complaints about these that can be made, that I've made in the past about other things too. So, for example, Paradox Haze doesn't read like a blue card. It reads like a red-white card to me. Absolutely valid criticism. We are just so fast past that point that criticism has fell on deaf ears for, what, fucking 5 years at this point. We are, Secret Lair has pushed that boat out. Now, interestingly, Secret Lair has pushed that boat out. I do think it's weird when the cards are in play boosters because they're more likely to be seen by newer players and thus create a bit more visual noise and disruption to the understanding of the game. But again, this isn't new. I guess Outlaws at Thunder Junction had it really bad with the newspaper ones. I'm willing when it's a special guest slot. I think this is absolutely fine. If this was like a really common thing seen like every pack, I think it'd be a problem. I think it's not a great way to teach your new players. Also, Sliver Overlord to me looks like a Nintendo Power magazine cover, I think. Oh, this is just fucking fantastic. Like, the Magus of the Moon, he looks like such a badass. He's got this like ship in the background that he's activated and the hero's watching him terraform a planet. Oh, and Warping Whale has both Magus of the Moon and Warping Whale I've played a lot of in my time in Magic. Also a big fan of Paradox Haze and Commander. But like, Warping Whale is a card that I've got people so hard with in Legacy at GPs in the past. So to be able to get myself a alien picking up a man and screaming in his face version of it, fuck yeah. Love all of this. This is great. And that's the previews for Edges of Eternity. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think I'm being too positive? Do you think I'm being too harsh? Do you think I'm saying some of these cards are playable and they're dog shit? Or I'm saying some of these cards are dog shit and they're actually the next hot thing? Let me know in the comment section below. And I'll be covering previews throughout the rest of the week as well as we get more and more Edges of Eternity stuff because the set gets me hyped. I'm very excited for it. See you all soon. Ta-ta for now, dickheads.